Welcome to the Shadows of Black Hollow, a journey into forgotten places, hidden terrors, and the price of curiosity. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and let the story begin. The van rumbled down the cracked road, headlights struggling to pierce the thick mist that had settled over the countryside. Michael Harris tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He wasn't new to strange places. Years of filming low-budget documentaries for small TV stations had taken him to abandoned hospitals, haunted mansions, and ghost towns no one had heard of. But there was something different about Black Hollow. It wasn't just forgotten. It felt deliberately erased. The assignment had come suddenly. Investigate Black Hollow, a town wiped off the maps in the 1960s, rumored to have been the site of mysterious disappearances. Perfect material for the new Mystery Uncovered series. Michael checked the GPS. Nothing. The signal had died hours ago. Only a single crumpled paper map he found in an old library led him here. He glanced in the rearview mirror. His cameraman Darren and researcher Lisa were half asleep, lulled by the endless drive. Almost there, Michael muttered, more to himself than to them. Ahead, the road vanished into the trees, thick, dark, and unmoving. A battered sign emerged from the mist. Welcome to Black Hollow, population. The question mark was spray-painted in dripping red. Michael slowed the van to a crawl. "Wake up," he said sharply. Darren stirred first, rubbing his eyes. Lisa sat up, blinking. "Are we here?" she asked. Michael nodded. "Yeah, welcome to nowhere." The van crept forward, tires crunching over gravel as the mist thickened. Trees loomed on either side, their skeletal branches clawing at the edges of the road. Darren pointed ahead. "Is that a house?" he asked, squinting into the fog. A faint shape emerged, a small wooden building with a sagging porch and broken windows. Michael pulled over. The engine sputtered once, then fell silent. Lisa shivered. "This place is dead," she whispered. Michael grabbed the camera bags. "Perfect for a story," he said with a forced grin. They stepped out into the cold air. The silence was heavy, pressing against their ears. No birds, no insects, just the creak of the old building as the wind shifted. Lisa checked her recorder. "Still no signal," she said. Darren swung the camera onto his shoulder. "Let's make it quick." Michael nodded, but a gnawing unease crept up his spine. Something about Black Hollow felt wrong, as if the town itself was holding its breath, waiting. They moved cautiously toward the building. The wood under their boots groaned in protest. Michael pushed the door open with a soft creak. Inside, the air was thick with dust and mold. Broken furniture lay scattered across the floor, and a single wooden chair rocked gently in the center of the room, though there was no breeze. Darren adjusted the camera's lens, focusing on the chair. "Creepy enough?" he whispered. Michael didn't answer. His eyes were drawn to the walls. Deep scratches marred the wood, long and jagged as if something with claws had tried to escape. Lisa stepped carefully over a broken table leg. "It's like everyone left in a hurry," she said. She pointed at a broken teacup still on a dusty shelf. Michael nodded slowly. "Or they didn't leave by choice," he said. The wind howled suddenly outside, slamming the door shut behind them with a bang. They all jumped. Darren laughed nervously. "Welcome to Black Hollow," he said. But none of them were really smiling. Back outside, the mist had thickened into a heavy fog that wrapped around the buildings like a living thing. The main street stretched ahead, lined with empty shops and sagging homes. A rusted swing set creaked in the distance. Lisa wrapped her jacket tighter around herself. "How does a whole town just vanish?" she muttered. Michael scanned the street. "That's what we're here to find out." Darren panned the camera across the desolate scene. "Looks like it's been abandoned for decades," he said. Michael pointed to a larger building at the end of the street. "That must be the town hall," he said. "Let's start there." As they walked, the silence pressed down harder, broken only by the occasional groan of old wood shifting. Michael couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Once or twice he turned quickly, sure he'd seen movement just out of the corner of his eye. But each time the street was empty, the fog curling lazily around the empty buildings. They reached the town hall. Its once grand entrance was cracked and faded, the doors hanging loosely on their hinges. Michael gave them a gentle push, and they swung open with a groan. Inside, dust motes floated through the air, catching the weak light that filtered in through shattered windows. A large, empty meeting room stretched before them. Broken chairs lay scattered across the floor, and a faded American flag drooped from the wall. At the far end of the room was a small stage. Michael climbed onto it and found a bulletin board covered in yellowed papers. He brushed away the dust. "Evacuation notice," he read aloud, dated 1962. Lisa frowned. Why would they evacuate an entire town without a record? Darren filmed silently, the lens zooming in on the brittle documents. Michael turned a paper over and froze. Scrawled across the back in dark, angry letters were the words, "It's still here." A chill ran down his spine. He turned to the others. "We need to be careful," he said quietly. "Something's wrong with this place." The group backed away from the bulletin board, the weight of the message sinking into their bones. Lisa glanced nervously at the broken windows. "Maybe we should leave," she said. Michael hesitated. They needed footage, but something primal inside him screamed to get out. Darren shook his head. "If we leave now, we have nothing. We've driven 6 hours for this." Michael nodded reluctantly. "Okay, we stay close. No splitting up." They moved through the town hall carefully, their footsteps echoing off the cracked walls. In a side room, they found old file cabinets tipped over, papers strewn everywhere. Darren focused the camera on a dusty ledger lying half open. Lisa picked it up carefully. "It's a registry," she said. "Names, dates." Her voice trailed off. Michael leaned over her shoulder. All the names had been crossed out, thick black ink slashing violently across the pages. Darren zoomed in for a close-up. A sudden crash upstairs made them all jump. They froze, hearts pounding. Someone or something was in the building with them. Michael motioned for them to stay quiet. They listened. The floorboards above them groaned under heavy footsteps. Darren tightened his grip on the camera, the lens trembling slightly. Lisa clutched the ledger to her chest, her knuckles white. Michael slowly stepped toward the hallway, peeking around the corner. Dust floated lazily in the stale air. He signaled for the others to follow. They crept out of the side room and back into the main hall. Another loud crash upstairs sent a shower of dust raining from the ceiling. Michael's heart hammered against his ribs. They needed to leave, now. He turned back toward the entrance, but the doors were no longer open. They were shut tight, as if they had never moved. Lisa tugged on the handle, but it didn't budge. "It's stuck," she whispered, panic rising in her voice. Darren swung the camera around wildly. "This isn't right, man. Doors don't just close by themselves." A new sound echoed from upstairs. Slow, deliberate dragging, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. Michael pulled Lisa back from the door. "Forget it," he said, keeping his voice low. "We need another way out." Darren scanned the room through the camera's night vision. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the walls. Lisa pointed toward a hallway leading deeper into the building. "Maybe there's a back exit," she whispered. They moved quickly but carefully, each creak of the floorboards sending a fresh wave of dread through them. The hallway was lined with empty offices, doors hanging off their hinges, broken glass crunched under their feet. Halfway down the corridor, Lisa froze. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Michael listened. A soft tapping, like fingernails scratching on wood, came from behind one of the closed doors. Darren lifted the camera, filming the door slowly, waiting for something to happen. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. Then, suddenly, it stopped. Michael swallowed hard. "Keep moving," he said. They hurried past the door, not daring to look back. Somewhere deep within the town hall, something was awake and watching. At the end of the hallway, they found a stairwell leading down into the basement. Michael hesitated at the top of the stairs. A cold, damp smell wafted up, mixed with something else, something sour and metallic. Lisa covered her nose. "It smells like blood," she whispered. Darren adjusted the camera, its infrared mode casting eerie shadows over the walls. "Basements are never a good idea," he muttered. Michael knew he was right, but staying upstairs wasn't an option either. He led the way down. The steps groaned under their weight. The basement was pitch black, the air thick and heavy. Michael swept his flashlight across the room. Rusted shelves lined the walls, filled with crumbling boxes and shattered glass jars. In the center of the room stood a metal table, stained dark with something that could only be imagined. Darren's camera beeped softly. "Low battery." He cursed under his breath. Lisa gripped Michael's arm. "Look," she said, pointing. Against the far wall, half hidden by shadows, was a door. Heavy, bolted, and slightly ajar. Michael approached the door slowly, his flashlight trembling in his hand. The metal surface was covered in deep scratches, some so fresh they still gleamed in the weak light. He nudged the door open wider with the tip of his boot. A narrow corridor stretched beyond it, the floor slick with moisture. Darren filmed from behind him, the green tint of the night vision making everything look even more unnatural. Lisa stayed close, her breath coming in short gasps. "We shouldn't go in there," she whispered. Michael glanced back at her, then forward again. He didn't want to go in either, but something deep inside him, curiosity, stubbornness, maybe something worse, pushed him forward. They stepped into the corridor, the air growing colder with each step. The walls were lined with old pipes that dripped water steadily onto the floor. Somewhere ahead, something metal clattered to the ground. They froze, hearts hammering in unison. Michael tightened his grip on the flashlight. Whatever was down here, it knew they were coming. They moved cautiously down the corridor, each step echoing louder than the last. The pipes hissed and groaned around them, almost as if the building itself were alive and breathing. Michael caught a glimpse of something smeared along the wall, dark, sticky streaks that looked disturbingly like handprints. Darren's camera beeped again, warning of critically low battery. He cursed under his breath and tapped it, but the light flickered. Lisa clutched Michael's sleeve. "We have to go back," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Michael was about to agree when they turned a corner and stumbled into a larger room. It was filled with old, rusted hospital beds, each one covered in a torn, moldy mattress. In the center of the room was a strange symbol scrawled onto the floor in what looked like dried blood. It pulsed faintly under the flashlight beam. Darren filmed it shakily, breathing hard. "What the hell is this place?" Michael muttered. Suddenly a low growl rumbled from the darkness beyond the symbol, and the flashlight flickered violently. The growl deepened, vibrating through the floor and into their bones. Michael swung the flashlight wildly, trying to catch whatever was hiding in the shadows. The beam flickered again, then steadied just long enough to reveal a figure crouching at the far end of the room. It was humanoid, but wrong, too thin, too twisted, its limbs bending at unnatural angles. Its eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the light like a cat's in the dark. Lisa gasped and stumbled back, knocking over a rusted bed frame with a crash. The creature flinched at the noise, then began to creep forward, moving in short, jerky motions. "Run!" Michael hissed. They turned and bolted, slipping and sliding on the wet floor. Darren struggled to keep the camera steady as he ran. Behind them, the creature let out a high, keening wail that made Michael's blood run cold. They didn't dare look back. They just ran, hearts pounding, lungs burning, desperate to find a way out of the nightmare that Black Hollow had become. They burst back into the narrow corridor, slipping on the slick floor. Michael grabbed Lisa's hand to steady her, yanking her forward as the creature's shriek echoed behind them. The dim emergency lights overhead flickered as they sprinted past the dripping pipes. Darren stumbled but managed to keep his feet, the camera bouncing wildly against his chest. Ahead, Michael spotted a rusted ladder bolted to the wall, leading upward toward a hatch. "There!" he shouted. They scrambled toward it, the sound of clawed footsteps scraping closer behind them. Michael reached the ladder first and shoved the hatch. It groaned, but didn't move. He threw his shoulder against it once, twice, and finally it popped open, a rush of cold, clean air spilling into the corridor. "Go!" he yelled. Lisa climbed first, scrambling into the darkness above. Darren shoved the camera through the opening and hauled himself up. Michael followed last, feeling hot breath against his ankles as he pulled the hatch shut with a metallic slam. Silence fell, but it was the wrong kind of silence. The kind that waits. They collapsed onto the cold ground above, gasping for breath. Michael slammed the hatch shut and twisted the rusted locking mechanism into place. For a moment, none of them spoke, their chests heaving in the frigid night air. The fog was even thicker now, swirling around them like living smoke. Darren hugged the camera to his chest as if it could protect him. Lisa wiped tears from her face with a trembling hand. "What the hell was that?" she whispered. Michael shook his head. "I don't know," he said, his voice raw, "but we're not staying to find out." They rose shakily to their feet. Around them, the town of Black Hollow was even more desolate than before. The mist curled around the abandoned buildings, muting every sound. No lights, no movement. Michael's gut twisted. It felt like they had surfaced into a different version of the town, one where they truly didn't belong. A distant bell tolled once, deep and hollow, from somewhere unseen. They exchanged a glance. Whatever was happening wasn't over, it was just beginning. Michael motioned for them to move. They kept low, darting between the ruins of the old shops and houses. Every shadow seemed alive, every broken window a watching eye. Lisa kept glancing over her shoulder, flinching at every noise. Darren muttered under his breath, mostly curses and half-formed prayers. They needed to get back to the van, but the streets twisted and shifted under the fog, unfamiliar and wrong. Michael stopped at an intersection, trying to remember which way they had come. The fog swirled and parted slightly, revealing a figure standing at the end of the street. It was tall, impossibly thin and completely still. Michael felt the blood drain from his face. "Don't look at it," he hissed. They turned quickly, heading in the opposite direction, but another figure emerged from the mist ahead, and another. Silent. Watching. Waiting. They were surrounded. The bell tolled again, closer this time, vibrating deep in their bones. Black Hollow wasn't going to let them leave. Not without a price. Michael grabbed Darren and Lisa, pulling them into the nearest alleyway. They stumbled over broken crates and debris, trying to stay out of sight. The figures in the fog didn't move, but their presence pressed down on the group like a weight. Michael's heart pounded in his ears. They crouched behind a crumbling wall, breathing hard, listening. Footsteps, soft but deliberate, crunched over gravel nearby. Lisa clutched Michael's sleeve tightly. Darren raised the camera, but Michael pushed it down. "No light," he whispered. They sat in tense silence as the footsteps passed, fading slowly into the mist. After what felt like forever, Michael risked a glance around the corner. The street was empty again, but the fog seemed thicker, heavier. It was like Black Hollow was alive, rearranging itself to trap them inside. He turned back to the others. "We can't stay here," he said. "We have to find another way out, fast." Lisa nodded, wiping her eyes. Darren just stared into the fog, his face pale. Somewhere in the distance, something laughed, low and broken. They moved quickly but carefully, sticking to the shadows. Every corner they turned looked identical. Broken houses, empty windows, streets swallowed by mist. Michael's mind raced, trying to form a plan. "The church," Lisa whispered suddenly. Michael looked at her. "What?" She pointed through the fog. A tall, crumbling steeple rose above the ruins. "Churches are supposed to be safe, right?" she said, her voice shaking. Michael wasn't sure he believed in safe places anymore, but it was better than wandering aimlessly. They made their way toward it, skirting the edges of the silent figures that still stood like statues in the mist. The church loomed larger as they approached, its heavy wooden doors hanging open as if inviting them in. Darren hesitated at the threshold. "This feels wrong," he muttered. Michael agreed, but they had no choice. They slipped inside, the heavy doors creaking in protest. Inside, the air was colder, and the pews were shattered and broken. At the far end, the altar was intact, and something lay on it, covered by a tattered cloth. They approached the altar slowly, the floorboards groaning under their feet. The stained glass windows were shattered, letting in long fingers of mist that curled along the ruined pews. Michael kept his flashlight low, casting long, shifting shadows. Lisa hesitated. "Maybe we shouldn't," she whispered. But Michael was already reaching out. He grabbed the edge of the cloth and pulled it back. Underneath was a book, thick, ancient, and bound in cracked leather. Its pages were yellowed and brittle, but the cover bore a symbol they recognized immediately, the same one they had seen scrawled on the basement floor. Darren lifted the camera, filming. The lens captured the worn letters burned into the leather, the testament of Black Hollow. Michael flipped it open carefully. Strange symbols and drawings filled the pages. Diagrams of the town, circles of figures standing around a central point, rituals, summonings, bindings. "This place was never just a town," Michael said hoarsely. "It was a trap, a prison, and something had gotten out." Lisa flipped through the brittle pages, her hands trembling. "It's all here," she whispered. "They tried to seal something away a long time ago, but the seal didn't hold." Darren lowered the camera slightly. "You mean whatever's out there?" he asked. Michael nodded grimly. "It was never abandoned because of economic collapse or disease. They left because they had to." The mist outside the broken windows seemed to press closer against the shattered glass, swirling faster now. Michael snapped the book shut. "We need to find a way to end this," he said, "or at least get out before it finds us." A loud bang echoed through the church, the heavy front doors slamming shut. Lisa screamed. Darren fumbled with the camera. Michael spun around, heart racing. Figures stood just inside the entrance, silent and unmoving, blocking their exit. The bell tolled again, closer, louder, vibrating the very air around them. Black Hollow had them now, and it wasn't going to let them go easily. Michael grabbed Lisa's hand and pulled her toward the side aisle. Darren stumbled after them, clutching the camera to his chest. The figures didn't move at first, just watched silently as the trio fled into the shadows of the ruined church. They ducked behind a collapsed pew, breathing hard. Michael flipped open the ancient book again, scanning desperately for anything that could help. Symbols, chants, warnings. It was almost impossible to decipher. Lisa pointed frantically to a page. "Look," she whispered. A rough sketch showed a circle marked in ash, candles at each point, and something written underneath in shaky handwriting. "Seal must be reforged with blood and light." Michael's stomach turned. "Blood and light," he repeated. Darren shook his head violently. "No way, man, I'm not doing some ritual crap." But heavy footsteps echoed across the stone floor, growing closer. They were out of time. Michael looked around desperately. Candles, matches, they could find those. The blood, well, they would figure that out if they survived the next few minutes. Michael spotted a broken candelabra near the altar and crawled toward it, staying low to avoid the figures stalking the aisles. He grabbed 3 half-melted candles and a box of old matches, shoving them into his jacket. Darren and Lisa followed, moving as quietly as possible. The figures seemed to hesitate, almost confused, giving them precious seconds. They ducked behind a cracked stone column, Michael striking a match with shaking hands. The small flame sputtered, but held. He lit the candles quickly, arranging them into a rough triangle on the dusty floor, copying the diagram from the book as best he could. Lisa knelt beside him, whispering hurried instructions. Darren watched the figures inch closer, the camera forgotten at his side. "Blood," Michael muttered, grimacing. He pulled out a pocket knife and pressed it against his palm, hesitating for just a moment before slicing the skin. Blood welled up immediately. He let a few drops fall into the center of the triangle. The candle flames flared, bright blue. The figures froze, their heads snapping toward the light in unison. The flames flickered higher, casting harsh, twisted shadows across the ruined church walls. The figures let out a low, collective groan, the sound vibrating through the floorboards and into Michael's bones. Darren backed away, his face pale. Lisa tightened her grip on Michael's arm. "What now?" she whispered urgently. Michael scanned the book with blood-smeared fingers. The next step wasn't clear. The writing was smudged, the ink warped by time. The figures began to move again, slowly but deliberately, encircling them. Michael took a deep breath and did the only thing he could think of. He stepped into the center of the burning triangle. As his foot crossed the line of melted wax, a jolt of energy surged through the room. The figures screamed, a sound so shrill and inhuman that it rattled the broken windows in their frames. Darren dropped the camera, covering his ears. The candles blazed higher, their blue light pushing the mist back inch by inch. Michael closed his eyes and whispered the only words he could make out from the book. "By light and blood, be bound again." For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The blue flames danced wildly, casting ghostly patterns on the walls. Then the ground beneath them shuddered, a deep, rumbling vibration that rattled loose stones from the ceiling. The figures shrieked again, staggering back as if an invisible force was pushing them. Lisa clutched Darren's jacket, her eyes wide with fear. Michael stayed in the center of the circle, feeling the energy swirl around him, lifting his hair and tugging at his clothes. The mist outside the church windows thickened, swirling faster and faster until it looked like a solid wall. The figures twisted and thrashed, their forms blurring at the edges, becoming less solid, less real. One by one, they began to disintegrate, breaking apart into black dust that was sucked into the spinning fog. Darren grabbed the camera, filming wildly. Lisa cried out as a sudden gust of icy wind blasted through the church, extinguishing the candles and plunging them into darkness. The rumbling stopped. The screaming ended. Silence returned, heavy and complete. Black Hollow was quiet again. But for how long? For a long moment, none of them moved. Michael stood in the center of the now darkened circle, breathing heavily. His palms still dripped blood onto the cracked floor. Darren slowly lowered the camera, the green light blinking weakly. Lisa was the first to speak. "Is it over?" she whispered. Michael didn't answer. He wasn't sure. The heavy silence of Black Hollow pressed against them, dense and watchful. Slowly, Michael stepped out of the circle. The book lay nearby, its pages fluttering as if stirred by an unseen breeze. He picked it up and tucked it under his arm. "Let's get out of here," he said, his voice rough. They made their way to the church doors. Surprisingly, they swung open easily now, groaning on their ancient hinges. Outside, the fog was thinner, the streetlights long dead, now flickering dimly. The town looked abandoned again, but less hostile, as if whatever had held it captive was gone. Michael led the way toward where they had left the van, nerves still on edge. They weren't safe yet. They hurried down the empty street, past sagging houses and shattered windows. Every broken sign and leaning lamppost seemed frozen in time, relics of a town that had never truly died. Darren kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting the mist to gather and form shapes again. Lisa stayed close to Michael, the old book clutched tightly against her chest. They reached the parking lot where the van sat alone. Untouched, Michael exhaled slowly, almost not believing it was real. He fumbled with the keys, dropping them once before managing to unlock the doors. "Get in," he barked. Darren and Lisa scrambled into the back as Michael slid behind the wheel. The engine groaned, once, twice, then roared to life. Relief flooded through him. He threw the van into reverse, spinning it around and tearing down the ruined road. As they passed the battered "Welcome to Black Hollow" sign, Michael couldn't resist one last glance in the rearview mirror. The town sat silent and still. But just before the mist swallowed it from view, he thought he saw a figure standing in the middle of the road, watching them leave. The van sped down the cracked highway, the fog thinning as they left Black Hollow behind. Michael kept his eyes glued to the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Darren sat slumped in the back seat, staring blankly at the camera in his lap. Lisa thumbed through the old book, careful not to tear its fragile pages. "We need to show this to someone," she said quietly. Michael didn't answer. Who would believe them? The footage Darren had captured would help, but without it, their story sounded insane. He shook his head. "First, we get somewhere safe," he muttered. The road signs were unfamiliar, twisted by years of neglect, but eventually they found a gas station, flickering under dying neon lights. Michael pulled in and killed the engine. The silence that followed felt wrong. He climbed out, stretching his cramped muscles, and looked around. The place was deserted, empty, abandoned. A cold knot formed in his stomach. Lisa stepped out beside him, clutching the book tightly. "Where is everyone?" she whispered. The world felt wrong. Michael scanned the darkened gas station. The convenience store windows were boarded up, the pumps rusted and broken. No lights, no cars, no sounds. Darren climbed out of the van, looking around uneasily. "Maybe it's abandoned too," he said. Lisa shook her head. "It feels different." She wasn't wrong. The air was heavy, thicker somehow, like the town had followed them. Michael motioned toward the store. "Stay close," he said. They crossed the cracked pavement, their footsteps loud in the unnatural silence. Michael tried the door. It creaked open slowly, revealing a dusty interior lined with empty shelves. An old radio crackled faintly behind the counter, hissing with static. Darren moved to the window and peered out. "Guys," he said, his voice tight with fear. "Look." Michael turned. Shapes were emerging from the mist at the edge of the parking lot. Tall, thin, and familiar. The same figures they thought they had left behind. Lisa clutched the book tighter. "We didn't end it," she whispered. "We just let it follow us." Michael slammed the door shut and dragged an old shelf in front of it. Darren fumbled with the camera, backing away from the window. Lisa clutched the book to her chest, flipping through the pages desperately. "There has to be something else," she muttered. Outside, the figures moved closer, their shapes more solid now, their faces still hidden in shadow. Michael grabbed a rusted metal pipe from the corner of the store. It wasn't much, but it made him feel less helpless. "Find something," he barked at Darren, who grabbed a fire extinguisher off the wall. Lisa's fingers stopped on a page. "There's another ritual," she said breathlessly. "A final binding, but it's risky. It says the price must be willingly paid." Michael didn't ask what the price was. He could guess. Blood, sacrifice, something worse. The radio behind the counter crackled louder, a distorted voice whispering in a language none of them understood. The figures pressed against the windows now, hands scraping down the glass. Time was running out. Lisa read the ritual aloud, her voice trembling. Darren and Michael moved quickly, clearing a space in the center of the store. They formed a rough circle with broken glass bottles and cans, the best they could find. The figures outside slammed against the windows, cracks spiderwebbing across the glass. Lisa knelt in the center, book open on her lap. Michael joined her, gripping the pipe tightly. Darren hesitated, then stepped into the circle too, clutching the useless fire extinguisher. Lisa sliced her palm without hesitation, letting her blood drip onto the floor. Michael and Darren followed, grimacing. As the blood pooled, the radio screamed, a shrill, inhuman noise. Lisa shouted the final words from the book. The figures shattered the windows, spilling into the store like a flood of shadows. The blood on the floor glowed bright red, the light expanding outward in a blinding flash. Michael felt himself lifted off the ground, weightless, spinning through darkness. For a moment he thought he heard someone whisper his name. Then everything went black. Michael gasped and sat up, blinking against the harsh morning light. He was lying on cracked asphalt in front of the gas station. The van stood nearby, untouched. Birds chirped in the distance, the fog completely gone. Darren and Lisa were beside him, slowly stirring awake. For a moment, Michael thought he had dreamed everything. But when he looked down, he saw the bloodstains on his torn shirt and the old book lying beside Lisa. Darren sat up, rubbing his head. "Are we back?" he asked hoarsely. Lisa nodded slowly, her eyes wide with disbelief. "It's gone," she whispered. Michael stood unsteadily, scanning the horizon. No figures, no mist. Just an abandoned gas station under a pale blue sky. They climbed into the van in silence. Michael started the engine, half expecting something to stop them. But the van roared to life normally, They pulled back onto the cracked highway, the world feeling oddly bright and too real. In the rear-view mirror, the gas station shrank into the distance, and for the first time in hours, nothing followed them. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, broken and empty, but for the first time, Michael felt a cautious sense of peace. Darren slumped in his seat, exhausted, the camera still clutched to his chest. Lisa dozed against the window, the ancient book resting in her lap. Michael gripped the wheel tighter, his mind replaying the nightmarish images over and over. He knew they had survived something unimaginable, but he also knew it had left a mark on them, a mark they couldn't see. As they drove further from Black Hollow, the road signs became clearer, more familiar. Civilization returned slowly. Gas stations, diners, other cars. Normal life. Michael pulled into a small town hours later. They found a cheap motel and checked in without speaking. That night, as Michael lay awake staring at the ceiling, he realized something. Some places never really let you go. Some shadows followed you, hidden just out of sight. And somewhere far behind them, in the ruins of Black Hollow, something was waiting, watching, patient. It wasn't over. Not yet. Thank you for listening to The Shadows of Black Hollow. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe for more chilling adventures. And remember, some places never let you go.